All right. Hello, everybody. Uh, I'm Gregor, and today I'm representing Clario. And I would like to talk to you about clinical trial design and what we did with DSL. So that's me, Gregor, and Markus will come a bit later. So who and what is Clario? We help diverse research organization in conducting clinical trials. And our goal at core is making sure that throughout that expensive process, we get the best evidence to make safer, more efficient drugs that help people around the world. So let me give you a little bit of an introduction to a few of those key terms. So what is a research organization? Well, you have the good old big pharma, right? Your very well-known Pfizer, AstraZeneca, But you also have, non-profit organization like the Anti-Cancer Fund, and you have public institution. Here, we're coming from Würzburg area, so I choose one from our local area. But a lot of universities all around the world are doing clinical trials. And what they do is they either sponsor or conduct clinical trials. Sponsoring meaning that they fund the research, they fund the execution of those clinical trials because it's involving hundreds, thousands, 10,000 people all around the world, and conducting. So from creating the base rules for clinical trials to actually bringing the treatments to the patients and collecting data and reviewing those data. And clinical trials are for, as mentioned, new drug or medical devices development, right? So if you have this new pain medication, or if you have, for example, this new ECG machine, but it's also intended for creating or developing the internationally recognized standard of care, like what's the best procedure for a heart surgery and what can be used to reduce the rehab time for patients. So that's what we do. That's what we research organization do, right? All right, let's look at this other buzzword, clinical trials, right? So we trial drugs, medications, and generally it's that we're asking, is that safe? Is that effective? We also trial devices, and we kind of have the same questions. Is that safe? But does it comply to regulation, right? So there is a long list of regulations that came upon experience that we need to comply to, right? So that we get proper data, right? So if you go to your doctor and then one doctor's has one ECG machine and give you one result, and you go to the other doctors and the other ECG machine has another result, really bad, doesn't help us, right? So regulation helps us there, right? To have the best standards. All right, clinical trials. Now, another big word is in terms of evidence, right? So you're looking for something when you start a clinical trial, right? You're looking to understand if that new molecule you just developed or that new process you just developed or that brand new technology like that you want to introduce is actually doing something valuable. And because it's impacting the life of millions of people around the world that could potentially lead to death, we really want to have hardcore evidence. So we deploy a lot of energy, a lot of engineering to make sure that those endpoints, which is this piece of data, is as reliable as it can be. And we collect a lot because we understand that we can be biased. We can, inject some of our views into the data. So we try to be as broad as possible to verify in many different angles. So endpoints is the game. We want data we can trend, and we want to rely on the data. So if somewhere in Japan you collect data, you want that it's really the same as the one collected in France or in the United States. So very critical. That's the piece. That's the golden egg. We do everything just for that. And actually, quick words just about what Clario does into that picture. So in the world we live in, collecting data is through hardware that works based on some software. We do collect data and centralize it via different platforms. And Clario is doing all of that, actually. We are a very old company altogether. I think it's 50 years plus of existence. We are all around the world, and we do hardware. Here in Germany, for example, some of our legacy founders built machine to test your lungs back in the day when it's about air pressure and pistons, and went into the electronic era. We have as well companies that own scientific process, like when we look at the data, how can we be sure that this data is valuable? If you look at an ECG, for example, how can you make sure that the ECG, that the person, the technician that performed that ECG to confirm that your drug is helping with heartbeat reduction? So it's kind of like that. How do you make sure that this is correct data, right? So it takes specialists, and we built a whole suite of software for those specialists to be able to review that data. We also do a lot of cloud and platform stuff where we collect all kind of data that have been scanned, because we come from a kind of a paper industry, right? Our biggest competitors is paper, because believe it or not, in 2023, clinical trials are done with paper. So we fill forms manually, we collect form manually. And so that's what Clario, right? So we do software, we do hardware, we do services, and we have scientific project management all around this, helping to create protocols, create the devices for it, up until the time you collect data, you analyze data, and hopefully you prove that your drug is doing what it's supposed to do. So in 2023, what's going on? Well, we see that thanks to the development of and the miniaturization of sensors, sponsors are interested to have all of those, because you can measure so much more. That's why I say the trend is to more endpoints, because now you don't only have those very expensive machinery like MRI scanner or ECG or lung capacity measurement. You also have all of those tiny sensors, the one that you wear on your watch, the one you can wear on the pendant and that measure basically your, that listen to your heart, the one that you put in your mattress that can basically tells like what's your sleep quality, the one you can put. No, you need to relog in. Oh. You're talking too much. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. I can do that for 3 hours, So, right, the Internet of Things hit us hard, because you're all there like, yes, we want this, we want this, we want that. We want to measure our patient. We want to understand as soon as possible, right? Like, for example, for a Parkinson's study, back in the day when we didn't have the sensors, like the patient that was having a stroke would have to first finish his stroke, then take his phone and report it to his physician and say, I'm having a stroke. But right now we can detect it live, right? And the site gets right away an alert and say your Parkinson diseased patient is having an attack, right? And we can be reactive, and we love this. We love this because we can intervene right away. But it means that there is a mountains of new sensors to integrate with. There is a mountains of software to integrate with. And they all have their protocols, and they all have their platforms, they all have their cloud services, and so on and so forth. So it became a mess of a protocol, like from 100 pages to 500 pages, because now you need to specifically say, like, that sensors work that way, collect that types of data. It's become a mess. It's become huge. So basically, we have an awesome opportunity to have very rich evidence. We can tell as soon as possible when the patient is about to have a heart attack. Awesome. We can interact, we can react quickly. It should be like the greatest news ever. But what it's actually meaning is a ton of risk, because you have, instead of having 10 platforms to integrate with, you have all of a sudden 50. And now your pharmaceutical company that should be just worrying about the proper molecule is worrying about integrating systems. It sucks for them, right? So you have this huge complexity, which is seen as a risk. But what we want to do, and that's where DSL helps, we want to flip that complexity as an opportunity. Bring it on. We'll handle the complexity. So how is that helping us? As I said, we do hardware, software, platform. All of that is configured per study. We have study clinical trials specific setup. So every single time you need to redevelop all of that, you basically need all of your dev to do the work again, again, and again. DSL help us to have the domain experts express those very complex protocol requirements without too much GPLs, without stopping involving GPL. And because we can interpret, we can as well execute the protocol, and we can do early detection of, bad config or bad logic. Early testing, right? We can speak right away with our clients and says, like, the rule you want to actually put into your protocol doesn't work. Because basically a protocol, if you look at a timeline, it's a timeline with decisions all the time, right? You make decisions to move a patient from the beginning to the end. So that helps us a lot. But what is really great as well is that now we can start thinking automating our systems. And we have configurable converters, right? So automation, safetiness in the way we automate things. And we can as well do a lot of documentation generations. We live in a world that quality is a document, right? Documentation is a huge topic for us. And sometimes we fool ourselves with just being a document and say, we have documents, oh, we're good. But very important for us. So we increase compliance because we're a very audited business, right? Constantly have people picking, proning at what we're doing. So automating this is a great and huge deal for us, and DSL has been great for that for us. All right, then I'm gonna let Markus talk a little bit and show you a little bit about all of that.
Yo. All right, so microphone is working. Okay, so what we do is we model protocols, right? How exactly they execute over time, when to do which questionnaire, when to do which procedure, what to measure, what to calculate, how to decide how to go on. And so, not surprisingly, where is the button? The core abstraction in the system is the protocol, which it said a while ago. Here now it says general. So that's the general part of a protocol, which collects all kind of administrative data. So that's kind of boring. So let's move on to the next slide. One important aspect of these protocols is that you collect data, right? So you have lots of questionnaires, forms is one thing, and then the other part is integrating devices that directly deliver the data without explicitly asking the participating subject. So this is form definition, right? Bunch of admin data. Then you have data definitions with, not so surprising, composite structured data types with fields. We also have in the data definition some aspects of the UI, which is apparently necessary. Okay. I thought about it against it like forever and give up. So then we have calculated values, which you can almost see as parameterless functions that derive certain information from the data we collect. And then there is how you map the data to the actual screen where a user is asked stuff. And then you have the kind of branching here where you skip certain screens or skip certain questions. Well, it's actually always screens, so you have to, whatever. So you can skip stuff based on previously collected data. So that's not very interesting. I mean, it's a major part of the business for Clario to define these forms in a way that makes sense, that has a reasonable UX, and of course it has the right questions to detect from a medical business knowledge perspective what you want to detect. So from the business perspective, these forms are a major aspect. From a DSL construction perspective, well, that's just a DSL that defines a bunch of data and collects, maps it onto a screen. What becomes a little bit more interesting from a DSL perspective is where you define the flow of what happens when does the subject have to go to the doctor, do some kind of procedure or measurement, when do they have to answer which form, when do they have to measure fever or take a pill or something like that. And so we have the abstraction of a study event, which is either a patient session, something they do at home, or a visit where they go to the actual doctor's office. And then you can deploy, activities there. Ask this form, perform, query this device. And then there's a whole bunch of scheduling. When the event happens for the first time, like for example, after the subject was activated 6 days later than that, and then it repeats weekly until some other thing happens. And then they can only do this between whatever the time says here. And then when they start filling the form, they have to finish it within 5 hours. So a lot of logic goes into that. And so obviously we have the DSL for that. There's lots of kernel F expression stuff in there. And then I'll jump ahead a little bit. One of the main parts is that you can execute all of this, right? So there's an interpreter behind that based on a discrete event simulation that I stole from Klaus. And you can write test cases where you say on day one, this happens, and then you expect a certain event to be available for the subject to do or not. And then you finish a certain task, you enter certain form data, you check that the schedule then changes or the form branches. So it's the usual unit test-driven protocol development. And we have visualizations that show charts when what happens, whether the user completed something on a particular day, which other activities are ready on which days. And we also have an interactive simulator where you can step through this thing. You can basically play the role of the study subject. You can interactively fill in data, play through the protocol definition, and then from that interactive simulation, you can then generate these kinds of tests. So we have test case generation in the sense of capturing it from an interactive session. We don't yet have test case generation in the sense of, some kind of analysis, looking at the protocol definition and coming up with reasonable test cases by itself. That's obviously a potential next step, currently not implemented. And then, like Gregor says, a major aspect is document generation. Major is one word, painful is the other. We put a lot of work into generating HTML, PDF stuff. In fact, there is a whole set of languages that do all that, and there's a talk later, I think the second to last talk today, the Node World stuff that's kind of based on this domain. So that's a quick overview of the DSL. Back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered it pretty good. So yeah, it's very helpful for us to be able, again, to have the capabilities to do complex requirements. And the alternative for us was basically somewhere in a configuration tool, have a black box and say, hey, dev, knock, knock, knock. Hey, Dave, can you do this for us? And the logic was that I hope the dev understands what I mean. I hope the tester understands what I mean, because I'll have to wait 8 weeks before I can see it for real. Here, nah. You can configure it. You are restricted to do something right, otherwise you have errors, and you can test it. And just for knowledge transfer alone, when you talk about this setup, some user may just jump to it and say, yep, got it, read it, I can't execute it there. But sometimes the best way is just to flip and write the test cases. And then you can literally drive the conversation through a test step by step. And that's, for me, that's awesome. But if you know test-driven development, you're not surprised. So that's another happy use case here. All right, what we learned. Expressing and testing protocols in one-stop shop is reducing risks. Yes, because when we actually start to do the real build, there is a ton of software to figure it out, for sure. Greater automation, yes. I hate Word documents. I don't want to touch them, so let DSL do this. Thank you. And plus, it's pretty because it's HTML. Development cycles then are very quick. Yeah, because I don't spend 20% of my time writing stupid Word document that nobody reads. Okay, what is left for us to do? Well, somehow we need to tame that learning curve, right? Because the bar is high. I truly believe once you pass the bar, you're in a happy world, and you just never want to touch your mouse ever again. Yuck. But yeah, we need to bring a lot of different profiles to learn that. And for us, it's from the young, adult having some dev backgrounds to the, almost to retire type of project management person, right? So our personas are just huge, right? So you need to bring all of that little happy people towards that curve. The MPS as a fat client is really restricting the user experience. We have some users that have part of the domain that is super simplistic. For them, configuring a study is like bloop, 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 boof, right? A DSL for that doesn't cut it. And yeah, interoperability. So as I said again, if you look at our domain as a huge map, some part of the map just do their things very simply. And we don't know really how to play with them because we need to tell them, guys, if you want to play well with us, do DSLs. And they're like, I don't need DSL, so that's a problem. What do we need in the future or consequences of those red dots? Well, MPS as a web app help us a lot because yes, we can build that interaction. I'm always talking about two UX, the editor user experience and the design user experience. Some people just want the design stuff. We want to do a little bit of server-side services so that, yeah, we can grab and we have some collaboration. We can have better deployments. We can control that a little bit better. And of course, again, that's the interoperability with non-DSL systems, right? So if you own a little bit a corner of that map, how can I know about your corner of the map, but you don't have to do DSL because it's basic, right? Right. So all the stuff, very important for us. And that's about it. Thank you very much for your attention.
What did you use to generate documents? I know that there were mentioned that it's going to be present in it. Okay. Keep the microphone and just repeat the questions. It's one top one.
Yeah.
You mentioned that evidence is the actual thing you are interested in. That is the most important goal. And on the other hand, we saw that the DSL collects a mountain of data. So now I wonder, is the data already the evidence, or do you have some rule-based reduction step, which is your magic ingredient, creating the evidence from this data?
Right. We collect bulk data and we have specialists looking at those data, and we understand that not the whole bulk of data is useful for us in the sense that it's not a proper evidence. So we do a reduction on the data to calculate the best, to calculate the most average. Yeah, but that's part of clinical trials, right? It's a mountain of data, and you need to understand averages and how to trend. Yeah, but that's really at the endpoint. So basically, what you saw is like, how do we collect the endpoints, right? When I show that form with the pain level, the slip level, that's the endpoints, right? What's your pain level after you took the drug? What's your sleep after you took the drug? What's your ECG? What's your blood pressure after you take the drug? That's the endpoint, right? That's the things you can trend. And generally, we do comparison, right? You took a piece of data before, you take the drug, and you look at the data after, right? So if it's about blood pressure, your blood pressure should either increase or decrease, basically, on what you're actually looking for. That's the endpoint. The proof that it works.
So the obvious follow-up question is, would another DSL be useful for doing this reduction step?
Yeah, a DSL for data management and data analytics. Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm lobbying hard for that. But yes.
So you mentioned that what you need is more interoperability with the non-DSL world. Can you give an example use case?
Yes. So, for example, there is a very important part of bringing patient into a clinical trial is to record that they have an informed consent in participating in clinical trials, and that is very simple for us to define. The historical way our business come together, it's in right now it's like there is a separate unit that owns just that tiny part of the map. And for them, DSL doesn't really matter. When they all think about their business, is like for them, it's not about like the complex requirement about it needs to be at that time. If that piece of data is there and that task is performed and that event has been performed, they don't care about that. Their game is that the most dynamic, interesting ways of selling the clinical trials to the patient, right? That's what they are. But the rest for them is just, it's a form that happens or not, turn on, turn off, go on. That's basically this, right? So when they take a client in and it says like, okay, how much informed consent you have? 5, okay. Right? So if you would have a JSON file that would represent that, you basically would have like 5 forms. And that's basically it. And it's called e-consent, 5 forms, done, right? So they don't need DSL to handle that complexity because the complexity is in the execution of the form.
What's the integration problem?
The integration problem is that right now, is that we don't have and it's us, right? That's our little problem. But the problem right now we have is that we don't communicate with them. We have not an easy system for us to be able to dump that time of data, us to import it, to represent it so that we can have the nice document that is comprehensive.
So you somehow consider it part of what MPS should provide?
Well, we should build that integration, yes. But I don't know if it's an MPS or not. But
okay.
I'm not opinionated on that. You're asking just the wrong person. I keep on looking at my boss. I'm like, okay, so I'm not saying something stupid.
Have you faced any problems with the editor? Or for example, I mean a performance problem when you want to display a lot of nodes, for example, some big protocol and a lot of rules are there or something like this?
What's the question in there?
So have you faced any performance problem when you want to display in editor a lot of nodes with big protocol?
Yep. Do you want to answer?
Yeah.
Because I want to say documents. But go ahead.
Yeah. So the editor, the editor that people use to edit the protocols, the language is designed in a way where you can easily modularize these things. So if the editor becomes too big, you put half of the visits into separate root, problem solved. For documents, it's different. We generate huge documents, and we do that through an intermediate document language. So we don't go protocol, HTML, we go protocol, document language, HTML. Now I did say something about the talk later. And if you open these documents in an editor, that is a problem. And worse, even if you don't open it in an editor, even the loading of the model takes too long. That's something where we have to optimize. So, but the editors themselves for the protocols are not the problem.
Okay, I think time is over, so we have to go to the next call. Thank you.
Thank you.